Alright, welcome back everybody. Ollie from FlightComp here, and we are on the SR-7 Vintage Slope Glider build part 4. I have moved on to the tail, so we have the elevator or horizontal stabilizer and the vertical stabilizer. And this elevator was comprised of a bunch of pieces which I have glued together. Was not a precise fit at all, so there was some trimming and fudging to be done. I do have the control horn in, which is a U-shaped piece of bent rod with some brass sleeving here. So the brass sleeving is sandwiched in between these two pieces of wood. And I have glued in, or just tacked in, the moving part of the elevators. You can see I have some bits of wood to provide me with even gaps and to tack the pieces onto the fixed portion. There's some tacks here. Same on this side. Here's the top surface. There's the back of the control horn. And the reason why I tacked all this together was because I need to be able to sand all this into a uniform shape. And I don't want to try to sand these pieces separately. So there's going to be a lot of shaping and sanding involved with these pieces. The rudder is, or the vertical is much the same. If you recall that this piece was supposed to be empty. Because they call for you to cover this with monocoat or some kind of covering material, and I think I'm going to fiberglass these pieces. So I filled in this with some scrap balsa here, so you can see. This portion here is the leading edge, and this also takes this little piece here, but I don't want to glue that on quite yet, because I think if I glue this on and start sanding and shaping this, I'll likely just end up breaking this off. So I'm going to do the majority of shaping on this, kind of leaving this part alone here, and then when it's very close I'll glue this on and do some shaping on this, and it'll all be good to go. So there's going to be quite a bit of sanding to get into here. I'm going to kind of stare at it for a while and figure out what I'm going to want to do. I think this part here gets glued to the fuselage. So I want to try to avoid tapering this part. So there's going to be some kind of blends that have to happen here. But we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to just start on this and I'll report back to you. So I've been sanding away on these parts. I have the elevator or the horizontal stab pretty much roughed up and done. Just sanding it with 100 grit sandpaper. Rounded off the leading edges and tried to put a nice taper on the trailing edge. And what I did was I drew center lines on the trailing and leading edges just to help, like as a guide. Here's the vertical. I haven't sanded it yet, but you can see the lines I drew on there just to help with shaping. This is the part that glues to the fuselage, so I've left this kind of untouched so it's still pretty thick, and then it tapers down as it goes to the tips. If I sanded a taper in this, I'd end up having a gap on the back of the fuselage where it glues to the fuselage, because it would taper away from the fuselage. So yeah, so I'm just gonna continue sanding on these. I'm gonna start working on the vertical here, and I'll rough shape this, and then I'll rough shape the little front bit, and hopefully glue them together. And then we'll see what's up next after that. All right, well, I ran into another little problem. I have rough sanded the vertical, and then I glued on this little front piece here. And I was going to sand that too, get a rough sand on that, but I'm just trying to test fit the parts on the fuselage, and you can see there's a gigantic gap in the front there, so I have to, I guess, glue on some balsa and try to fill that gap. It's going to make this piece much longer, but I could also try to sand this angle, right? So I could try to sand the bottom of this and make this flush, but then I'm going to end up taking off a bunch of surface area on this, and I don't really want to do that, because to me this already looks like a pretty small vertical. So I think I'm just going to make a little shim, and I also have to put little gusset in here. So I'll get on with that. Alright, I got that little piece installed here. So that the fit is much better. Probably have to do a little bit of sanding when I actually assemble the pieces onto the fuselage. And you can see there's a little fillet there. And the vertical is basically completely rough shaped. And so is the elevator. Next thing I'm going to do is I have to put some scrap balsa here to fill this gap to the fuselage, as you can see right there. So I'm going to move on to that, and after that, basically the tails are done. And like I said, I am going to fiberglass these, so I'll just kind of set them aside, but I probably will also cut the elevators loose from the fixed portion of the horizontal. Alright, well, I've made this little fillet thing here to help match this up with the fuselage. It will require a bit more trimming and shaping once I've fiberglassed these pieces. And then I also put a little fillet on the back of the vertical so we can kind of get an idea of how this is going to look now. Something like this. So getting a little closer. I think I'm going to put these pieces aside now and work on doing the mounting system for the wing and the fuselage. So we'll have to put some plates in the fuselage and holes in the wings and run the bolts and all that. I have cut a rough slot in the back of here for the elevator control horn. Just rough shape. Just to help me see how it fits, but I'll clean that up later. So let's move on to the wing mounting system. Moving on to the wing mounting system, the instructions call for cutting a 1 3/4 by 2 inch square out of the supplied 1/8 inch plywood sheet, which I've done here with a scroll saw. And this gets glued in underneath here in this general area. And then they call for tapping this, drilling and tapping this, and installing these nylon bolts to hold the wing down. It says 2, I only found 1 in the box. I didn't look too carefully though, so maybe there's another one. But anyway, I'm not going to use this. I'll probably switch those out for some MP Jet metric nylon bolts and some, I'll probably use some blind nuts instead of just tapping the wood. I'll get to that later. And then I've started a hole here in the front of the fuselage. It calls for a hole 1/4 inch that's 7/8 down from the top or the bottom side of the fuselage. So I drilled like an 1/8 inch hole just to start it, and I'll open it up later. So I think the next thing I'll do is glue in this piece of plywood here. So I'm going to go back from the back and try to scuff up the plastic and maybe even drill some holes or something. I don't know. This stuff's really hard to glue to. And we'll get this clamped in here and glued up. And then after I do that, we'll probably call it a quits for this one. And then the next video, which I guess will be part 5, we'll really get into the wing mounting. We'll try to get the wing actually mounted up completely and maybe start in on some of the fairings and stuff that go here. I'm really not looking forward to any of that because it just looks like pain in the butt, honestly. But alright, so let me just glue this in and we'll call it a quits after that. Alright, I got that plate clamped in place and I did drill some holes. You can see some of the 15-minute epoxy oozing out, just hoping that helps adhesion. I'll clean all that up when the glue is dry. Probably be able to show you how easy it is to scrape glue off this fuselage. So that's going to be it for this installment of the SR-7 old school vintage glider build. Got the tails basically wrapped up and ready for glassing, and we're starting on the fuselage mounting system for the wing. Hopefully in the next video we'll get the wing bolted up and maybe start on some of the wing fairings. And then we're going to get really close to moving on to the finishing stages, which is going to be, all that glassing and sanding and priming, and then moving on to painting. So still quite a bit of work left to do on this guy, but hope you guys found this video interesting, and maybe it'll help you with any of your builds that you might be doing or interested in doing. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.